How did you learn to let go? Coming from a Christian background, we believe that all things work together for the good of those that love the Lord. Like, this is not all things working together for your good.
Doesn't feel like it. That's for
How
sure.
did you do that? How did you not let that affect your faith?
It did affect my faith. My forearms had tendonitis throughout them. And in my case, it caused permanent damage to my arms. That was devastating for me because it meant that this whole dream I had since childhood is unrealistic because I couldn't actually do the thing that I wanted to do because I was too injured to do it. And it was frustrating and it was physical pain. But ultimately, what I realized was I had to make the choice. Was I going to give it up entirely or was I going to do something else?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Davina and welcome to 10 Questions with Davina, a personal development podcast with impactful discussions at its core. In each episode, I sit down with my guests, remarkable individuals who have faced life challenges head on and emerged stronger. And I ask 10 or more carefully crafted questions that uncover the heart of their experiences. We explore their dark moments, their breakthroughs, and invaluable lessons they've learned along the way. My goal is simple yet profound to provide you, my listeners, with real, raw stories that resonate with your own journey. Today, I will be speaking with Lena Blain. Lena grew up in Surrey, BC, in a loving Christian home and has been studying music since the age of 5. She moved to Calgary in 2009 to attend Ambrose University, where she studied piano performance. She met her husband, Travis, while singing in choir at Ambrose. They bonded over music as Travis was also studying piano performance, and they were married a few years later in 2012. Since graduation, she had been working as a piano teacher and working in ministry as worship leader for the past 14 years. At the end of 2024, she officially received her credentialing through the EMCC to be a licensed minister and is working at Center Street Church as a worship pastor at the Brestwell campus, along with spearheading a program for youth called Worship Development that I took. She is passionate about developing other leaders and teaching her students to use their musical gifts to glorify God. Lena has a dog named Pippin and a cat named Rafiki, and her husband and her are currently living north of Calgary on their family farm. Hi, Lena.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me on the show. Great to be here with you.
If you all can't tell, I'm so excited. I don't know, when did we even have the discussion to like get you on the show? In January.
Yeah, sometime in January.
And you're here now, so I'm so glad. Okay, how's your day been so far?
Good. Yeah. I was teaching piano students this morning, which was really fun. So now here we are.
Let's get started. My first question is, what were your biggest dreams when you were growing up?
Biggest dreams. Yeah. Well, I've been studying music since I was 5. So I was always involved in so many types of music at my church. I was always part of like the children's choir, and I was taking piano lessons from 2 different worship leaders who were piano teachers at the church throughout my childhood. And so I've always grown up playing worship music and loving it a lot. But I think as I grew up, I started becoming more and more passionate about playing the piano, and it became a little bit of a dream of mine to be a concert pianist. And I thought that was the most amazing thing ever, to sit at a giant grand piano on a stage and play with an orchestra and a choir. And I just thought that'd be so cool. So yeah, when I was little, I wanted to be a concert pianist because I thought that'd be awesome.
Okay. I think this is the most creative answer I've gotten so far. I've heard different ones, but this is like you've kept that dream going to an extent, but you're still doing piano music till today. So
I am, yeah. It's just a different style, really.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. My next question is, what is something that your parents or the people around you did or didn't do that has made you who you are today? And you can talk about the good and also the bad.
Hmm. I think one thing that was really valuable was the way that my family instilled the Christian church and the Christian values in my life as I was growing up. We were always a part of church events, always serving, always at church late at night. My parents, they did a lot of renovations at our church growing up because my grandfather actually was part of building it. And so throughout the years, my family was always part of the church. And so I think one thing that they really instilled in me was that the church is more than just a building, but it's a family and it's a body of Christ. It's not just a location. The church is the people at that building. And so I think it was really important to surround myself with a good community of people who love and care for each other and just want to show God's love to other people. Yeah, the Christian values were probably one of the biggest impacts that I had growing up, but then also just really being a part of music throughout my whole life. And yeah, as I was growing up, I would play piano in church sometimes. We used to do this thing called offertory, which nobody does anymore since COVID. But we used to do offertory, and that was always the part where somebody would play a special song, and that was always me. I would get up there on the piano and play whatever song the teacher had me doing that week. And so I was always playing in front of people. I never loved being in front of people, but I did it a lot. I would still get nervous all the time, and I still do. I'd sometimes get nervous singing and playing in front of people, but I think just that constant repetition and exposure to playing music in front of people was a really important part of my growth as a musician for sure.
Okay. And do you ever feel forced? And I ask this because when I was growing up, or not even just me, kids in general, like we were almost coaxed into playing the recorder or the piano. Did you ever feel forced to do it?
Yes and no. I loved music, but I didn't love all the songs I was playing.
Yeah.
And so there was times where I'd never wanted to practice. There were many times when I didn't practice. There were times when I felt like my parents forced me to practice. And so yes, there were times when I felt forced to do it. But I do think that it is a parent's job to teach their children discipline and self-discipline. And unless I had somebody on me teaching me to do that regularly and consistently and growing it as a habit, I probably would not have continued because if it was up to me to do something hard, I probably would have quit. But because I had people spurring me on and saying, you can do it. I know this is hard now, but it will get easier. Yeah, just having people in my life to kind of keep me going, even when things were hard, really helps you overcome some difficulties and get better and improve and develop and grow. So, yeah, there were definitely times I never wanted to practice.
Thank you for being real and honest. I know that you've
Yeah.
already started talking about supports and external support and how people have helped you. And I will definitely ask about that later on. Can you walk us through career journey? Like how did you like I don't can you
Yeah,
walk us through your career journey? How did you get to where you are today?
sure. Hmm. So the only thing that I felt like I was good at when I graduated from high school was music. And so I poured my heart and my soul into doing music and singing and playing the piano. And throughout high school, I played instruments. I played like the saxophone and the trombone and different instruments like that. And so when I was thinking about university, all I really wanted to do was music. And so that's why I chose Ambrose because not only was it a great university to study music at, but it was also a Christian university. And I felt like those values were important to me. And so as I was studying in university, I still wanted to be a concert pianist at that point when I started, but I guess I just didn't really realize what all that would entail. And it's so interesting to take piano lessons as an adult or as a college student because suddenly you realize how many people there are around you who are better than you. That was a really interesting hurdle to overcome personally. You are probably never going to be the best, and somehow you have to deal with that and continue to move on and still try to improve and develop and get better
Yeah.
um, until you are the best that you can be. But as I was attending university, I started getting involved with leading worship. It's something that I did while I was a teenager as well. I would participate in singing or playing the piano for my youth group or in our church services. And so I was already kind of doing some of that. And so as I got more involved, we would have weekly chapel times. And so I started participating in leading as a worship leader at our chapel. And one of the values that my music teachers instilled, I don't know what the word is, was this idea of musical excellence. And growing up, I had taken piano exams. And so I was very familiar with the pressure of playing a song perfectly and with musical excellence and what it took to get to the point musically where you could play a song that well. Um, and so it was a really interesting thing to grapple with in university, this concept of what does it look like to play with musical excellence, but to do it at church on stage? Because when you are a concert pianist, it's all about you and what you can do and how good you are and how amazing you are and your talent, your gift. But when you're a worship leader, it's all about God. And that perspective shift was really interesting to try to deal with because suddenly I was realizing that, oh, like worship leading actually isn't about me. God through music is about God, not the people. And so that concept of musical excellence was really confusing me because I was like, how do we be musically excellent if it's not even about us? And so I guess that was the point in my life where I really started trying to develop other people. And so it was my goal that my worship team, we would do the best that we possibly could with the giftings that we had to play the music to the best of our abilities for the congregation, for the glory of God. And though we knew it wasn't about us ultimately, we still wanted to give our best to God. And so that's where this kind of overlap for me started happening and gave me this passion to kind of launch me into a new direction, a new career path. But there was also a really difficult time in university where I was playing the piano so much and so often and playing such difficult classical songs that I actually injured myself. I know this is probably something we can talk about later on, but it's really interwoven into my story
We can talk
because,
about it now. I don't mind.
yeah. So what happened was it forced me to go down a different path that I didn't know I wanted. Being a concert pianist means you're playing these classical, difficult songs all the time. And suddenly, this injury meant that I could no longer play as well as I wanted to. I could no longer progress in difficulty because it hurt too much. And so, both of my forearms had tendonitis throughout them. And at first, I didn't realize that's what it was. I thought it was muscular. I thought, oh, it's like when you're working out and your muscles hurt after. They're just getting sore because I'm using them more and they'll heal and then I will be stronger. But it doesn't work like that with tendonitis. Unfortunately, it involves scar tissue and permanent damage at times. In my case, it caused permanent damage to my arms. And so that was devastating for me because it meant that this whole dream I had since childhood of being a concert pianist was kind of unrealistic because I couldn't actually do the thing that I wanted to do because I was too injured to do it. And so I had to try to grapple with that really big blow. And I couldn't understand why God would give me the gift of music and then not allow me to, fulfill my dreams. Like I didn't understand. And there were other times when there was one moment in particular that I can think of that actually launched me down a different career path from wanting to be a concert pianist. And so I remember I auditioned to play the piano for a worship youth conference that they were holding at our school. And the worship team was supposed to be like the best of the best. And so I was like, well, I'm a good piano player, so I'm going to audition and I'll probably get it. because I've done a lot of worship music and I was a little bit cocky about it, not gonna lie. And then they actually didn't choose me. And I was pretty devastated by it. I felt rejected and frustrated. Um, but then during that conference, I remember sitting in the back of the room. I was sitting on bleachers because it was in a gym. I was watching the worship team lead, and everyone was singing and everyone was glorifying God. And I realized that it wasn't about me at all. It was about God. And in that moment, I heard God say to me, "That's what I want you to do. I want you to give me glory. I don't want you to give glory to yourself." And I realized that he was trying to tell me that I was searching for my own fulfillment, my own validation for my own gifts and talents, but forgetting that he gave them to me. And so, yeah, I realized like, oh, I may not be able to lead, you know, an orchestra as a concert pianist, but I can lead people into God's presence to give him glory using the gifts and the skills that I have instead.
Yeah. A
Yeah.
follow-up question I have is receiving such a devastating medical diagnosis must have been very crazy in my opinion. Like what was
Mm.
going through your mind when you were told that you have tendonitis on not just one, but both forearms and there's gonna be scar tissue?
I think at the time I had hope that it would improve,
Hmm.
because they had said that if I went to different things like physiotherapy or got certain injections or medications or creams or stopped playing the piano for a whole year and didn't use my arms at all, that I could probably heal. And so at the time,
Probably.
yeah, yeah. At the time, I thought that they would heal. I thought that there was hope for a full recovery. Um, but unfortunately, I didn't actually take a full year off of playing the piano. Um, I finished off my college year in April or whatever it was. And then I spent 4 months not using my arms or playing the piano or doing anything strenuous. And they did feel quite a bit better. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to get back into it. And so then I continued with my piano lessons the next fall in university. And it just got worse. It
Why did
just
you do that if you knew?
because the doctors, like I was seeing like tons of different people and going through physiotherapy, and they assured me that it could get better. And my dream was to be a concert pianist. And so I thought like, well, I can't just stop my studies now because that'll delay my graduation. So if I don't finish taking piano lessons in the 4 to 5 year span that I'm here, then I'm going to have to stay longer and go to
And you don't
college.
want that.
And I did not want that. I wanted to finish college within the 4 to 5 year span of my degree. And so I chose to just keep going. And my professors worked with me on picking different types of songs. And so I played mostly slow, classical, soft, romantic music, which did help, but it didn't make it any better.
Yeah.
So
My
I,
question, yeah,
yeah, I changed the style of how I was playing as well. And
yeah,
the technical part of it was a learning experience too.
okay. My
Yeah.
question is, how did you learn to let go? And I ask this because
Mm.
we as human beings, we become very attached to things. It's either like a dream or a person or an idea or something. My question now is, how did you learn to let go? And secondly, coming from a Christian background, and we believe that all things works together for the good of those that love the Lord. Like this is not all things working together for your good.
Doesn't feel like it sometimes. That's for
How
sure.
did you do that? How did you not let that affect your faith to the extent
Mm.
where you're like, I don't want it anymore. I'm not doing it again. So those are my two questions.
It I think it did affect my faith. It was something that I had to overcome,
Mhm.
and it was something that I had to work through for a long time. Um, it was frustrating and it was physical pain. Um, but ultimately what I realized was I had to make the choice. Was I going to give it up entirely, or was I going to do something else and do something that was still musical, but just not concert piano related? And so, in order to let go, I still continued doing music. I just didn't do it to the extent of what it would require if I were going the other direction. And so, the way that I let go was by falling in love with something else. And I fell in love with leading worship. I fell in love with improvising. I fell in love with creating my own style of music. I fell in love with taking guitar riffs and playing them on the piano instead and making the music my own. And that is a very, very different experience than being forced to play exactly what's on the page. And so I let go of that dream by finding a new one. And I really felt called to lead worship. I felt like being a concert pianist was my idea, but being a worship leader was God's calling for me. And so it didn't feel like my dream died altogether. I was still using my music degree. I was still using my ability to play the piano. It was just for a different thing. So, yeah.
Okay. I like how you said that to let go of one thing, you had to like fall in love with something else. And
Hmm.
you did that. So I'm glad. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I want to move on to you getting married at a young age. How old were you?
I was 21.
Okay, that's your like
It is young.
and now you've been married because if you got married in 2012, we're in 2025. That should
Yes.
be 13 years this year.
Yes. Yes, it
Okay,
will be.
okay, okay. And so I'm first gonna ask, what was it like getting married young?
Hmm. Growing up in a really traditional family, Christian home, all of my extended family, it was a normal thing for people to get married young. It was the norm. And it wasn't unusual. Like all of my siblings, they were married in their early 20s as well. Most of my cousins were married in their early 20s. And so for my generation, the millennial generation, it didn't feel weird. It didn't feel too young. It felt like this is just the next logical step. And so when Travis and I started dating, I told him, like, I don't want to just date to date. Like, I want to date because I want to find my husband. And I told him right off the bat, and he knew that was my expectation. And if it wasn't going to work out, then I needed him to let me know. And so the fact that we went into our relationship already knowing each other for a year, we went to school together for a year as friends, and then we dated the second year. And that helped a lot because we already kind of knew each other. But when we started dating, I was pretty clear about my expectations that if it wasn't for marriage, then we needed to get that figured out right away. And so, yeah, we actually only dated for just over 9 months and then he proposed to me. And so that's really fast. But it's because we went into the relationship with that expectation.
Okay, now in next question that I have is, I know that was it up to 2 years into your marriage, no? Or 1 year into your marriage?
We were married for 1 year
Okay.
and then Travis was injured. Yeah.
And what kind of injury?
Yeah. So he had a spinal injury. He had a history of degenerative disc disease, which basically just means there's fluid in between each of your spinal bones, and the fluid was disintegrating or leaking out, which meant that there was no padding or cushion between the bones in certain areas of his spine. And unfortunately, he already had some difficulties with his back. And so we went water skiing one day. And unfortunately, when he was trying to be pulled up out of the water, he heard a pop and it burst whatever fluid was remaining between the two bones in his lower back. And so he really, really damaged his spine. Um, and it changed our lives. It meant that from then on, we spent the next 7 years trying to get him to heal. And so we were married for a year where I was working as a music teacher and he was finishing his last year of university. And then we both had a year where we were normal, healing, both working full time. And then he was injured. And so from then on, it was quite a struggle because he couldn't work specific jobs that he would have normally been able to work because of the pain. And the injury only continued to progress. And unfortunately, the doctors didn't see him as an urgent enough case to really push for surgery. And so it took us many, many years of pain and struggle to work through with our medical system until finally, after seeing, it was maybe 7 or 9 surgeons before somebody actually agreed to give him back surgery. So we went through the ringer and he went through excruciating pain. And that's one of the main reasons why we didn't start a family after we got married young. And it was honestly because he was struggling so much with his own health and I needed to work. And so that was our plan. So it was a lot to work through and a lot to deal with after only being married for about a year.
Cool.
And yeah, it was a struggle for sure.
And what kept you guys together? And I ask this
Yeah.
because I've heard of stories where one person gets cancer and the next person can't take it. And I like how you said us, because you're recognizing that one person's accident affect not just one person, but like both people in the relationship.
Sorry. Can you ask the question again?
Yes, I will ask again. Okay, I was asking what was that like for you? The 7 years between the accident and when he finally got surgery.
Mm. It was a real challenge emotionally for me. And in that time, actually, I was really struggling a lot. I was struggling with symptoms of depression. And I actually didn't know at that time that I had chronic depression. It's something that I had struggled with my entire life, but I never talked to any doctors about it. I never asked any, um, medical professional about what depression looks like. And so as we were trying to deal with all of the difficulty of my injury and his back injury at the same time, I did spiral into depression and I did struggle for quite a few years. And I ended up going on medication for depression, for antidepressants, and it made a massive difference. What I realized was for me, it was the serotonin. I just couldn't produce enough of it in my body. And so it was a medical reason for me to go on it. But there were also pretty intense practical struggles that we were dealing with in real, in our life. But I found out later that my family has a history of struggling with depression, but they never talked about it. And I had no idea. And so for me, it was actually genetic. And so that's the really interesting revelation to find out that, other people in your family struggled with depression as well, but just never said anything. And so that was a new adventure that I had to go on to figure out how to heal my emotional health, but also how do we follow Jesus when everything is going wrong? How do we believe that God is good when we're suffering? Where is the good in this world when everything sucks? And that was a spiritual journey that Travis and I had to go down together and figure out together because um, we loved each other and we genuinely wanted the best for each other. And we were in this together. And I think the fact that he felt like my soulmate and we bonded so much over music was one of the things that kept us together the most, as well as the constant support of our community and our family. Um, and so we never did feel alone. We always had a support system around us helping us. And even though there were some pretty dark times, and some days it was a lot harder than others, and there were other difficulties thrown in, um, other sicknesses thrown on top. Um, in the end, we knew that God would provide, and we did see his provision throughout that time. Yeah, and we grew in our dependence and our trust in God, and I'm realizing more and more as I mature in my faith that we're actually in control of so little in our lives. We we want so badly to control how our lives are going to go and turn out, and our career path and who we marry or fall in love with or whatever, and we so badly we want to be in control of our life because we want to be able to do it ourselves. But ultimately, we are very flawed humans. We are very incapable humans
Yeah.
to some extent. And so a lot of the strength that we needed to get through that time came from God. It didn't come from us. I think it was him working in and through us that kept us together and helped us to support each other. And I think when you focus your marriage on God and not on yourself, um, it changes things because we live in a very individualistic society where we want to have everything we desire. We want everything to go the way that we want it to go. And we're very self focused on our wants and our needs. But when it comes to marriage, you can't be self focused or your marriage will not work. And so we had to surrender and give up certain things, and we had to submit to each other. And marriage cannot be 50-50 all the time. It probably is not ever going to be 50-50. And you just have to come to terms with that. There were many times where I had to care for him or he had to care for me. One of us did more work than the other. But as long as you are both in it 100%, it doesn't matter as long as you're both working together. And yeah, you really need to love the other person and show them love and not just be super self-focused. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Okay, I have multiple follow-up questions from this. And the
Okay.
first one, and I'm going to try my best to ask as many as I can within the time. The first one is what you said about having, how can we trust God when life isn't working the way we want it to?
Mm,
Like, crying out loud, how it's almost like that common question of how can we know that there is a God and there is good when so many people are dying, not because they did anything wrong, but
mm.
because they just died? Or like, how did you do that in your life?
I've realized that God uses our circumstances and the things that we go through to develop and shape us into the people that He wants us to be. And so, even though there are times when we have to go through some pain and hardship and suffering, ultimately, He has a plan that is better than our plan. And as you walk in your Christian faith and He reveals that plan to you, you begin to trust Him more and more because you see it unfolding in front of you. And you realize that He was there all along and He was guiding you and planning it all along. It's just a matter of following Him. And I don't know, does that answer the question?
It does. Looking back now, would you say that there were tiny light in the tunnel, or like, I realized that when we look back on our stories, we see a lot of things that we might have missed. Were there
Mm,
a few things that you missed?
yeah. I think that God used that time where Travis couldn't work to develop me, which is
Oh,
really interesting because if he was healthy, we probably would have started a family. We probably would have worked full time together for several years, bought a house, had children, and I would have probably been a stay at home mom. And that's a beautiful option for a lot of people. But I think that God wanted something different for me. And I think that He was calling me to be in ministry. And He wanted to use me to impact other people and help them grow in their relationship with Him. And teach them through music how to love God. And he used that time to help me grow my career. He used that time to help me become a better leader, to study, do more studying. I took a couple of um, courses in theology. I did some master's studies online as well in worship leadership and in theology and what the Bible says about what worship is. And I would have not had that time or energy to do that if our life was different. But because I was in a position where I had to be the caregiver and the financial provider for our family, I'd use that time to develop me in my career path. And so he brought me to this place where I am today, where I'm working as a full-time worship pastor. And he used that time to help me become a better music teacher and taught me what kind of a teacher I want to be and how to build a piano studio. At one point, I had 20 students coming to my house for piano lessons. And then in my second job as a worship leader, I ended up opening a music studio in my church office. So I would work at the church for 20 hours and then I would spend 20 hours teaching piano students, and most of them were from the church. And so I started teaching them worship songs. And then they started participating in worship at youth group. And then they started participating in worship in our church. And then they would play in offertory. And then they grew up and were on worship teams and became worship leaders. And um, yeah, so I think that's really where that passion kind of grew for me, was in the midst of the trial and the difficulty. He was shaping me and helping me to become the person that he wanted me to be through the suffering.
Yeah.
And through my dependence on him, it meant that I was looking to him for leadership and not looking to myself. It meant that I was trusting him and walking through the doors that he opened, and at times rearranging where I was going whenever a door was closed. And was that hard and difficult? Absolutely. Did I have to overcome certain obstacles or certain losses? Absolutely. But looking back, I can see how he was guiding and directing my steps to get me to where I am today, to be working with the next generation and teaching them about worship leadership and what does it mean to glorify God with your body, with your whole life. What does it mean to worship as more than just music? What does it mean to worship as a lifestyle and as
Yeah.
a choice on of how to live? Yeah.
And
And
how
so
do
I
we, yeah,
go ahead.
okay. How do we as human beings move away from being self centered to
Mm.
becoming less focused on ourselves and more focused on the greater goal, in whether it's in marriage or it's worshiping or it's on a team, because we're always so focused. Even I am, whether I sing the wrong notes and I'm on stage, I beat myself up about it. And now I'm hearing that it's not about me.
It it takes a transformation of the heart.
Mhm,
It takes a willingness to look to God and look away from ourselves.
mhm.
And it's not easy. It's still something that I struggle with. Um, and if I'm being totally honest with you, I don't feel like I'm great at it all the time. And one of the things that I probably struggle with the most is anxiety. And my anxiety stems from my fear of failure. And that comes from this perfectionist drive that I developed. And so if I'm being honest with you, I I think it takes a lifetime sometimes to learn how to be selfless, and it takes submission and surrender to your own goals and your own agenda to, you know, choose to love God and to accept his plan even if it's not your plan. And that is one of the ways that I'm working towards combating anxiety. Is I kind of look at it as I see love as a choice, because love is not just a feeling. You can feel like you're in love with somebody, but unless you choose to love that person for the rest of your life, feelings will come and go. And so I kind of see the same with anxiety. Anxiety is a feeling, but it's also a choice. And so I'm learning more and more how to choose to not be anxious. There is so much scripture throughout the Bible that says, do not fear, do not be afraid, do not be anxious. God is telling us not to be afraid and not to be anxious, but how? How do we do that? We can't just turn.
Yeah.
It's a feeling, yeah, for sure, but it is also a choice. And so you have to try to replace that anxiety with something else. And
What do you do for yourself? How do you
um
replace that with something else?
it sure takes a lot of prayer. Um I would say that as I'm reading scripture and as I'm praying more and more and making that more of a habit daily, the more I want to do it
Yeah.
because the more I see it transforming and changing my heart. And the more focused on Jesus we are, and the more focused on trusting in Him that we are, the less anxious we feel. But there is something incredible about how there's peace that transcends understanding that only God can give us.
Mm.
And I have experienced that peace many times over when I'm at my most anxious time and I don't know what to do. I don't know which direction to go. The medical system is failing us. Everything is falling apart. Nothing's working. All this crazy anxiety comes over me. But it's in those moments of prayer and surrender to God, saying, God, I can't do this. And in our dependence on Him and our choosing to trust in Him and trust that we do have hope for the future, that's when His peace just falls on you.
Yeah.
And it's so inexplicable. You can't explain it. There's nothing that you can do to describe it other than just suddenly the anxiety melts away, and the peace of God replaces it instead.
Okay.
But that only happens through prayer and through a relationship with Christ.
I'm very glad that you mentioned struggling with anxiety because anxiety has been real in my life since I was 13. And it started from being worried about what other people think of me and how they think I am and how they think I look to being worried about how do I explain this? I've always been that A student and I'm glad, but then the issue is that I thought that that was all I could do.
Mm.
So I was even telling you over the phone yesterday or the day before that when I first moved to Calgary and having to like switch the Nigerian and then the Calgary education system, I was like, wow, that had been taken from me. I've built
Mm.
my entire identity around the grade that I get. And now that I cannot get them, what am I? So that made me very anxious. Applying to colleges, anxious. Like this entire week, anxious.
For sure. Yeah.
So
So
it's nice to know that I'm not the only one that has this perfectionist mindset and like that likes to give it her all, but is also very afraid of failing.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do you deal with yours? Maybe I can get some tips from you when it comes to fear of failure.
Oh gosh. It's something that I'm still working through, if I'm
Yeah.
being totally honest with you. But I think what it comes down to is reminding ourselves over and over and over and over and over who we are in Christ. Because the only thing that really matters the most is what God thinks of us.
Yeah.
And He doesn't care if we make mistakes while we're on stage. He doesn't care if we slip up while we're playing an instrument. He doesn't care if our worship isn't perfect. What He cares about is our heart. He cares if we love Him. He cares if we truly desire to worship Him. And I think I had a real bad fear of speaking in public. And a few years ago, 2.5 years ago, when I first started working at this church, this was one of the biggest congregations that I've ever had to work with before.
It's
And
very big.
to stand in front of 1,000 people and say something out loud was terrifying, especially when it was something that I had to create and come up with. Because, thoughts would run through my head like, does anybody care what I have to say? Is this any good? Does this make any sense? Do I sound weird? Do I look weird? The only way to overcome that fear of failure was to stop caring what everybody else thought and to say, I literally do not care what you think of me because I believe that this is what God would have me say in this moment. And you can overcome fear when you're less focused on other people. You can overcome it when you are more focused on following Jesus and doing what he's asking and calling you to do, because then you care less about what other people's opinions are.
Yeah.
And that releases you from a lot of anxiety.
I think
Yeah.
for me, the fear of what other people would think of me, seeing me cry, almost stopped me from posting my baptism story on
Mm,
Instagram. Because I was like, no one wants to see me cry. No one wants to see me cry. So I think it took me almost 3 weeks to finally post it. And I kept having this feeling that I don't know. Social media works in a very funny way. You
hmm.
don't know who sees what. You
Yeah.
can be scrolling and you randomly see something. And I'm like, I don't know if anybody will benefit from this. I'm not aware. But I was like, let me just post it just like that. And then a friend called me right after and was like, hey, thank you for posting this.
Isn't
And I
that
was like, what
amazing?
do you mean? Thank you for posting. She was like, something happened to me and seeing you and your work in faith was almost like a push. And wow, that's all I can say when it comes to that.
Yeah, God really does work in mysterious ways. When we trust in him and do things that glorify him, um, it impacts other people
Mhm.
and it can go so far beyond us. And we have no idea what God is doing in the lives of other people. But if we follow him and follow where his spirit is leading us to do something that may be scary or uncomfortable, he will use that for his glory. And it's amazing how other people can encourage you by that too, without even realizing like how it might impact others.
Yeah. Okay. Now, next question is what is one piece of advice you would give to younger Lena? And that might be 22, 23. It's up to you. What's that one piece of advice you would give yourself?
I think it probably would have to do with some of the fear of failure for sure. It would be just to try to be confident in who God made me to be. Um, and remembering that making a mistake doesn't define my character. It doesn't define who I am. And I'm talking more about making mistakes in public on stage when I was performing. That was one of the massive, massive areas of anxiety for me was stage fright. And I was like, how am I gonna get over this? And I just wish I learned sooner that it's okay to fail sometimes
Yeah.
and to be less hard on myself. And I think that's something I'm still continuing to learn how to do is to be less hard on myself. But that perfectionist mentality comes from a place of self-preservation and selfishness at the same time.
Also,
Um, well, I think that I want to be perfect and to perform, say whatever it is that I have to say in public perfectly so that other people will think highly of me, so that other people will judge me well, right? And I guess what I'm saying is like when you remember who you are instead of what other people think you are, if you remember who you are in Christ, that's what helps you to overcome some of those anxieties. And so I think I would just try to,
be
if I
less
were
hard
to
on yourself.
myself, yeah, to
Yeah.
be less
And
hard on myself.
what's how can people that aren't Christian gain from your story?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Hmm. I think I just want people to know that there is so much more for them than what the world has to offer.
What do you
And
mean?
when you start living beyond the world and you start living for Jesus instead, your life changes and your priorities change, your relationships change, and your heart changes. And I think sometimes people think that this world is all that there is, but it's not. There's so much more that is in store for people, that God has in store for everybody. And so I guess what they can learn from me is just that my testimony is that God has changed my life and that He can change their life too, and that He loves you and He wants the best for you. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Okay. Now we're reaching towards the end, and at the end of each episode, I give my guests the chance to ask me one question. And yeah, this is your opportunity.
To ask you a question, what is one way that you want to work towards overcoming fear?
Okay, that's a good question. That's a good question. What is one way that I want to
Work
use, like
towards
work? I
overcoming
want to work
fear.
towards. What's one way? So basically, like, what's one actionable step I can make
Mhm.
to overcome fear? From my experience, I've realized that, okay, how best to explain this? Right now, a fear on my mind currently, my two main fears for this week is one, I have a pitch competition tomorrow, and I'm afraid that I will not win
Mhm.
because we as in my team and I have not created our PowerPoint slide yet. That's one fear. Second fear is I procrastinated so much that I missed, or I am going to miss the deadline for a school I wanted to go to. So like to transfer. And this is the school that I've been researching on. I love them. I love what they do for undergrads. And because of my own mistake, I'm in this mess
Mm.
because it takes 15 days for the transcript to get to them.
Okay.
And it's today, the 20th of February. The deadline is March 1st.
No,
I don't
no.
know. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know how I'm going to do it. So those are my main two fears. Now, working with that, a way that I can overcome this fear when it comes to the pitch competition is be less focused on, I think basically it has to do with the perfectionist mindset. Be more focused on the quality of my work. I don't know how to explain this. I'm a perfectionist because I'm always trying to give as much as I can within the time that I have. And I'm
Mhm.
always like, oh, if I had more time, if I had more time. But I have to realize that I'm never gonna have enough time. Like there are some things that are gonna be out of my control. And in this case, the deadline for my
Yep.
presentation is out of my control. I don't have anything I'm going to do. So I need to let go of that if I had more time and then realize that I have a day. How can I use that day well?
Mm.
And then for the application, the university application, I think overcoming that fear is I'm beating up myself because I attached my future to that university. So I thought to myself that I'm not going to be as high as I want to be if I don't go to that school. But listening to your story and how you created your idea of what you want to do, and God had an entirely different thing. So I'm like, maybe not. This is another school I meant to go to. So we're gonna see how that goes. So not procrastinating. I think, well, I used to think that I had overcome procrastination and that I was so disciplined and whatnot. But I think even though I'm not where I was 5 years ago, I still have a long way to go. So I have not, in fact, overcome procrastination, which is,
Mm.
but it's a reality check.
Mm.
That's my answer to your question.
That's awesome. Good for you.
Obsessed. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Lena, for talking to us. And
Mhm.
us as in me, the listeners, I'm so glad that I got to do this episode with you. And thank you for sharing your story and centering it around Christ. Because like you said, we as human beings, we like to think that today is all there's going to be. And sometimes we forget that there's more to the world, and there's more to earth, and there's more to our time on earth. So to people that are listening to Lena's story, I hope that you're thinking about the lessons, whether it's on anxiety, being a perfectionist, learning to let go, and so many different things. And I hope you feel empowered to make changes in your life. Lena, where can we find you? Like, are you on Instagram? Are you like, where are you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, Facebook. Yeah.
Okay. What
Don't
is
post a lot online
no?
though. No.
Okay. So there's no. Okay. I was thinking, where can people get more inspiration from you? But maybe go to Century Street Baseball. If they
Come
want
to
to see.
church. Come to church and be inspired.
Yeah.
I'll be there.
Yes, you will. Century Street Baseball. And yeah, we need to sing together one time. We haven't. We need to arrange the schedules for that to happen. But we'll
Yeah.
see how.
I love
Okay. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Bye.
that. Thanks.
Okay.